There we go. And so your written comments, your image may be included as well as transcripts. So if you would like to protect your privacy, we invite you to rename your Zoom profile with your first name only and your pronouns if you like. Breakout rooms will not be recorded. Because we have back-to-back sessions, the session will end promptly at its end time, and we encourage presenters and participants to share contact information so that you can have further continued discussion where you would like. And for social media users, please use hashtag, I'll put it in the chat, ArtsChange25 if you feel inspired by something and want to share your experience today. So thank you for joining us, and I am honored to welcome Ann Harris Wilcox and Mike Durkin, who are presenting on the Mending Project.
Thanks, Missy. It's great to be here, and it's been a little while since Mike and I were in the presenting it since we finished in when was that? November. So
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
nice reunion. Um, so we're presenting today on the Mending Project, which is a project that Mike Durkin pitched to us probably in the fall of 2023 initially when we heard it. And it was um, something that intrigued Missy, and she passed it on to the rest of the faculty. And I read it and I just thought this project that he has envisioned really matches some of our priorities in the program of dance and movement, which are interdisciplinarity, work, collaboration, community engagement. And I just was like, I got to learn more. And so in talking with Mike, um, we fleshed out this and Mike, I'm going to just go, we're going to go through the structure of our project together. And then hopefully at the end have some time for some questions and maybe a little more reflection. Um, but I want to just introduce you first, Mike, to give you a chance to explain your vision a little bit about this project and how we started, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah, I've been doing a version of this project in a number of different sites all across the country. I'm based in Philadelphia and Brooklyn, New York, where I've done versions of this project in older adult centers, in community spaces, in recovery houses, in a lot of different sort of sites. And that legwork of doing like physical mending of clothes. Like we start from this idea of like mending of clothes, like repairing, particularly in places in which clothes are uh, needed and uh, folks need the capacity to mend. And then we use that as inspirations to start the conversation around mending other areas in our life. We would talk about things that are happening on a day-to-day basis, things that are happening in the site that we're in the neighborhood that we're in the community that we're in, and then sort of thinking about mending largely in general. And then we use that as the next step is use that as inspiration to create these quilt squares. In which I've gotten a lot of reclaimed fabric from a lot of different sites, in which I have got these fabric pieces in which we create this quilt square together, and then which will be part of this larger quilt. And this is a project, like I mentioned, has been done all across the country. I did a version of this project at University of Rochester, at Reed College in Portland, Oregon, last winter around the same time, thinking about sort of mending in place in Portland, as well as at Reed College. And I worked with the Department of Theater and Dance up there, as well as the Office of Institutional Diversity, to create these mending sessions where we explore mending from a variety of different perspectives. And that's what really has drawn me to University of Rochester and the gift of being in so many different spaces, from Eastman School of Music to dance and movement to theater to sustainability and all points in between, just finding these overlap, finding these intersection points that use the concept of mending as the starting place and to explore in sort of a physical movement space or in dialogue or in visual arts in actually making material. So it's been a really exciting adventure being up in Rochester.
Awesome. So we're just going to kind of walk you through, how we formulated this, and some of the collaborators that Mike just highlighted with a little bit. We've got a ton of photos from this 6 week residency, but we really wanted to make sure that we were, creating something together with components and threads, if you will, of people and students, faculty, community that don't necessarily interact, that they had a common mission, that there was something that was this universal creative endeavor that we were all on for these 6 weeks. And it was kind of interesting because you'd hear about people doing, things, but it just like yesterday's presentation with Alexi and talking about how the community formed this beautiful quilt together in their recovery project or organization. It just is something that once it takes shape, the parts making all this one unified whole, it's super moving. So we wanted these were some of our goals along the way. So we broke it down as we were formulating how to organize this into kind of this, what we call the spine of the project, are these four principles: tradition, expansion, experimentation, and community building. And we kind of uh, address each of these not in isolation, kind of happening, a lot of them happening simultaneously, but those are our four like pillars, if you will. Mike, do you want to talk about tradition a little bit, where it's coming from, and yeah.
Yeah, the work was originally sort of generated in where I was working in a women's shelter, and I started developing this project with the women uh, there at the shelter, and we found a lot of sensation around this idea of these conversations that would happen as we're doing these sort of the task of sewing and repair work. And this was inspired by the Gee's Bend circles in Gee's Bend, Alabama, that the women would sort of create these large quilts together. But the crux of the experience was this like common ground that was found. And so we used that as the starting place of finding the tradition of these older quilts, these classic quilts, the tradition of quilting as the starting place. You'll see in an example later on that we return back to the image of quilting.
Great, thanks. So is in terms of experimentation, we see this as part of the focus of all the interdisciplinary connections we were hoping to make in this project. This is where the it was like, once I started putting out there to colleagues and other people, what do you think about this concept of mending and your discipline? And everybody just wants to talk about it because I think it's such an important concept these days. We have division in every dimension, it seems like, that we are looking in our society. And so thinking about your discipline as a means of an agent of change, or what it needs to mend itself internally. These raised questions among lots and lots of different faculty, and I was overwhelmed by that. And so started meeting with everybody over the summer to see how it would fit into their curriculum. We wanted this to kind of flow into what's already happening, and for instance, in my class, I'll say it actually shaped the whole trajectory of the program. My class that I teach with Saul Armour-Skata, called Ecolinguistics, it's a course that looks at verbal and nonverbal language. And so we thought about we always have a theme every time we've taught this course, and the idea of thinking about how language divides or can mend us, both verbally, how we verbally allow this to happen, and how in our nonverbal language we are either helping to create a place of healing or mending, or we also are creating an exclusion, division. So the opposite of that. So we spent the whole semester on that topic. So bringing Mike in with with the mending project and sewing the quilt had kind of this, again, the traditional tradition coming in with the interdiscipline intersection of our own field of study. And so it was a beautiful thing. And that happened also in many other of these categories. So you're seeing over on the left here, printmaking, choreography. Missy had us come into choreography class. Moving Memories was another community engaged class that is working as a choreography class that's working with our elders in the community and our students. Costume design, shapes, patterns, putting it together, looking at the geometry of it all. Sustainability, Karen Berger reached out and Mike came into Karen's class working with some of her capstone students. And then Sarah Penner and in theater. And then on art and art history, we had a bunch of collaboration. I'm going to let Mike talk about that a little bit more because it was really rich, the collaboration with art and art history department. So that's just a few of them. So Mike, you can talk a little bit about each one and I'll just pass
Yeah,
through them.
yeah. I mean, and like we see here, like with dance and movement, from a variety of different ways, from the actual physical making of material, from choreography to movement, score, sort of using this idea of mending. And a lot of the work that we did in the sort of the physical space was like using story as the impetus, the starting place, using that as inspiration to create this sort of movement. Like in the one class, the dance on camera class, we explored sort of the use of bodies in space. And then we sort of like see in the theater department, we see from costume design to improvisation that there are a variety of different ways in which the intersection points between mending, material making, physical structure has all sort of like been at play. We had students that were coming from, actually, I worked with one student who was in the three different classes that I was in. Like he was in Eastman School of Music when I was there. He was in visual arts. He was in theater. So it was a really sort of exciting moment for this individual to have all these different versions of art making at his disposal. And then here at in the studio art program and at Sage, there was an exhibition that was happening with the students called Mend, in which they explored from a variety of different lenses this concept of mending and material making. And you'll see three different examples of this. One sort of, as you can see on the further left-hand side, what looks like symbols of traditional quilt squares, and I used that as inspiration. That became this sort of movement score that individuals can participate in. And then we use this concept of mending and material making and collaging, working with the photography students. So we had two classes in which I was a part of, in which we combined a sort of material making using thread and created this photo quilt. So combining the students' photography work that they generated with sewing material, thread, and fabric, and sort of create this collage work.
Yeah.
And then sort of headed towards Eastman, which we had a really exciting partnership with them, thinking about mending from a music school perspective and thinking about the extreme like situations and course load that students go through from undergrad to grad to post-grad students, sort of thinking about mending in their sort of daily lives, thinking about musicianship, thinking about them as scholars, as musicians, and what those intersection points are via sort of the conduit of making these quilts, and what you can can see is that yes, we've made the quilt, we've made these squares together, but it becomes about these interactions that really sort of fill the space. And then we extend that even further on campus beyond the classroom, where we're working with students from all different spaces, thinking about sort of what's happening on a day-to-day basis. And what was a really sort of exciting time is like we've captured a moment of time. Whatever the students were happening in that moment became material for us to create these quilt squares together. And I think what was really lovely is folks that have uh, were in other classes that wanted to continue to finish their work, to friends, and it just sort of kept getting sort of passed through a variety of different spaces. And you can see in where we were at in Wilson Commons, sort of being present there, interacting with what's happening on a day-to-day level, being present when students were there, just as an outlet, for folks.
Yeah, wanted also people to have the moment to see us and be curious and be like, what's this? Can I do this? Can I join you? And the answer was yes. So we also wanted open sessions in the community, and so we are very grateful to So Green, which is a organization in Rochester that fabrics by the tons are donated to them, and then they sell it at a really reduced price to the community. They offer lessons. They're really advocates for uh, fabric teaching of all sorts, as of the craft of using fabric in many, many different ways. And so we are super grateful to Jane Beck, especially, who opened her doors so that we could have a couple sessions a week down on East Main Street. And here's two photos from there. You're getting a sense of the environment there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Well, go ahead, go ahead.
I was plowing on knowing a time frame. So, um, the expansion concept, I mean, you're already seeing expansion, so experimentation is also expansion, right? But this is the poster that we had for some of our things, and I have to give Trish Cochran the concept of this poster. When I was talking to her, she was like, "Oh, I see a quilt of your events," and I was just like, we're going to try to make that happen. So. This lists some of the events that we were trying now to expand to the concept of mending our environment, mending our relationship with the environment. Sorry, but also mending in other aspects of society that we need to address. And so, one of the first ones in this expansion and was to present this documentary by Ian Deffrin called A Bullet Pulling Thread, which really connected us to think about how, as a society, we are still in desperate need to help mend our relationship with our mental health, and especially in this specific film, mental health crises in relationship to police response. And this is a story about a quilter and her brother. And we were fortunate enough to have both Marilyn Farquhar, who is one of the subjects of the documentary, and Ian Deffrin, along with Mike here to be in this panel. And then reaching out to Anthony Villani of the Rochester Psych Center, who came to add his voice and experience with people who firsthand experience mental health crises and that relationship with the police, and giving his perspective just really fleshed out this um, whole situation of what's happening in our world. We have, the story of Daniel Prude and in our own home community, and so when I knew of this documentary, I really, really wanted to bring it. And the students that came, I have to say, we saw tears in their eyes. It was super moving. The film, I hope that you get to see it sometime. Um, it is a Canadian distribution, but if you ever see of this, A Bullet Pulling Thread, it is worth checking out. So we were very delighted to reach our mending theme in this capacity for one of our events. Here's Marilyn is Anthony Villani on the left, Marilyn, Ian Deffrin, the filmmaker, and myself. Mike, I don't know where you were when we took the photo, but this is one of Marilyn's uh, quilts. And the thing that is Marilyn's story is that after her brother was killed, from the police during a mental health crisis in Canada, she changed her quilting to address her grief process at first and then awareness building. And so as she goes out and presents her work, she is able to bring up these conversations and talking about grief, talking about mental health, and talking about the injustices of the homeless that are have a high percentage of mental health illnesses, and it's a beautiful thing. Again, inviting conversation. But because she was a quilter, it just kind of beautifully tied this in. And this picture of Marilyn on the right, I love because she's going beyond her grief now into her art again, and but still raising awareness of her story and other people's stories. So we switch gears now just to talk about one other aspect that we were addressing. Another aspect is our relationship with the environment. And so we gathered, as the slide says, scientists, educators, legislators, art activists, and student researchers to have an open discussion in our community at the Brighton Library about how can we mend our earth? What are the musts that need to happen right now? So it's a little, in some ways, segued off from the actual quilt making, but it's all about this. We all have to add our voices to this notion of mending. And so having a night to hear from experts and artists and people who are really focused on mending our this world was a beautiful discussion and got us outside the U of R and the campus um, collectively. Mike, do you want to talk
Yeah,
quickly?
and then yeah, and then you can forward to the next slide.
Mhm.
And then working with the country dancers of Rochester, we explored, they created a collaborative quilt together, and we used this concept of contra dance through the action of the imagery of the quilt that was there. So we can keep going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can see so other examples, and then there was a lovely conversation with humanities talking about community-based work that I did in my art form.
We were invited into the Dignity series. We also worked with different student affiliations. Here's the Interfaith Center session. And they're also, yeah, busy quilt making, but the storytelling that was going on during the quilt making was what was so beautiful as well. I have to say, it's one of my favorite nights was interacting with them. Here's Mike at School of the Arts. Do you want to mention anything about that,
Yeah,
Mike?
we can keep going. I know we're getting close to time.
We're getting close, right? So community, I don't mean to just jump over that last picture because it's so joyful. But to finish up, we wanted to say, okay, you have all these extending threads and these squares are all over the place. And we needed a night for everyone to come together. And I don't know if you could notice, but the date up there is November 6th, which happened to be the night after the election. And I really didn't know if anyone was going to show up. And it ended up that lots of people showed up. And it was a very healing closure. We were able to reveal the quilt together. We were able to share food, break some bread together. And then we had the beautiful uh, uh, music. I just wanted to come back to Aya playing here from the Eastman School of Music, whom we met from one of the other sessions, and she volunteered to come play. It was really a synthesis of everyone who had been involved and seeing our quilt together. Here are the different stories, and we took a moment to have people, if they'd like to, express the story behind their square and what it means to them. And it was really a powerful and moving moment. Did you
And
want to add
we
anything to
invite
that?
you, and we invite you now for the last few minutes. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer under that. You can see the lovely funders for the project as well.
Yes, we could not have done this without this long list of supporters. And I was on pins and needles about this, and everyone really supported the concept of mending and were generous with their funding of us, and we are exceedingly grateful. So I can stop share now. Great. Yeah. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I will say that I was able to be involved in several of the sessions and also that final session with the dinner and the sharing. And I felt like that final sharing was really moving because people like it was still a group of strangers in many ways because they had participated in various, Mike was here for 6 weeks, right? So we weren't all involved in everything. And but people went up and sort of described why they made what they made in the quilt and there were some personal stories and everyone was really supportive. And like Ann said, it was the day after the election and we were all uh, you know, vulnerable, I guess I would say. And it gave us hope to be together in that way that evening. And I didn't expect that. Like a lot of us were like, oh, I don't know if I can make myself get there. But those of us who did, I think we're really grateful.
Thank you for that, Missy.
And what was really extraordinary about the experience was being able to be in so many different places and find such beauty in the collaboration, beauty in like students across all different disciplines, all different majors, many of which were double major or had like from science to art. So it was like finding those intersection points were really sort of lovely and found that like organically through the process but also internally with the class and like with the students understanding the relationship between their major, the art making that we were doing, and the mending that was happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going to come on camera. I'm Ermin King, but I wanted to respond and also ask a question. I'm really enthralled by what you are sharing and the way the theme worked its way through so many different disciplines and intersection points and with enormous creativity. And I'm touched by the mental health component. I used to work at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center right at the bedside of our service members returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. And I can't help but think of mending as a theme in connection with service members. And so I know that if you don't have trained, credentialed mental health professionals in your team, working therapeutically in an intentional way would probably not be the direction you would go initially. But have you considered, or Mike, have you worked with populations who are affected directly by mental health issues? And I mean, we're all affected by them, but I mean personally. And have you worked with that area that's where the arts work is inherently therapeutic without it being therapy, quote unquote, but also potentially considered working in conjunction with therapists in delivering this kind of content?
Thank you so much for the question. I know we're getting close to time, so I'll answer it as concise as I can. Yes, the answer is I worked in a women's shelter in which the women were battling substance abuse and mental illness, working with the therapists and social team on staff. using art as an outlet, art as therapy for the folks. I do art therapy, but I'm not an art therapist. The work that I do is very in consideration of all that stuff. I've also worked in veterans population, doing this type of work, understanding mending from a variety of different lenses to it. And I know the importance, and something that I want to consider moving forward is continuing this type of effort.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for sharing your time with us. Missy, thank you. Thanks, Arts Plus Change. Really, really an honor to be here.